This week we're in Uden, a quiet town in the province of North Brabant, in the southern Netherlands. It was the fall of 1973, probably the 10th of November, on a night lit by a near full moon. At around 2:15 in the morning, Ann Dolphijn, who was 55 at the time, woke up needing to use the bathroom. Nothing strange about that. She got out of bed and started making her way from the back of the house to the front where the bathroom was. As she passed a window in the hallway, something caught her attention. It was like a flash of white, just a flicker at the edge of her vision. She kept walking. Right now, the bathroom mattered more than whatever might, or might not, have been outside. But something was out there, moving slowly down the street. As she made her way back toward the warmth of her bed, Anne turned back toward the window, a little unsure if her curiosity was getting the better of her. She stepped closer to the glass, trying to get a clearer look. Her movement behind the curtain was small, almost imperceptible. For now, she remained unseen, but whatever it was drawing closer, and she was only moments from being discovered. Welcome everyone. Stories Lost is back with another episode. This time, our focus is on one of the humanoid flaps of the 1970s. 1973 was one such year. When UAP sightings accelerated, reports of a mast and the arithmetic truth revealed anomalous peaks. In its aftermath, calls, letters, and recordings trickled in. Fragments of testimony that, taken together, sketched the outline of something vast, irregular, and yet to be explained. And so it would happen that a private letter reached the office of Dr. J. Allen Hynek at the Center for UFO Studies CUFOS in Evanston, Illinois. It had been written by a man whose father, back in the Netherlands, had taped a conversation with a woman recounting an unusual encounter she'd had several years earlier in the fall of 1973. Familiar with the work being done at CUFOS, the Sun summarized the case and mailed the letter to Hynek, believing it might still be relevant to ongoing research into close encounters. The letter was passed along to David Webb, who had previously compiled the report. 1973, Year of the Humanoids. Although the case had not surfaced during the original wave of investigations, David noted its similarities to other reports from that same period and included it in his second edition, which was published in 1976. In February 1978, Dutch UFO researcher Douwe Bosga returned to the Netherlands after spending a year working at CUFOS. During his final months there, he had focused heavily on cases involving close encounters and came across a fascinating case featured in Webb's book, one that had originated in his home country. Once back home, he felt it was time to take a closer look at what he considered the most intriguing close encounter reported in the Netherlands. From March to July, Douwe conducted several interviews with the witness in this case, aged 60. Throughout the notes and documentation she came across as both serious and reliable. She appeared mentally sound, had no motive to invent the story, and had never once sought public attention. Because of Douwe's investigation, the case reappeared in the media 5 years after it occurred. In the press, the witness was referred to by the pseudonym Saskia Vermeulen. Many journalists reached out to speak with her. Several of them later stated that they never doubted the witness's honesty or integrity. Now that she is no longer living, those familiar with her case regard it as fitting to name her openly, Ann Dolphijn. Now, let's go back to where it all began for her. Ann leaned in, pressing her nose to the glass, trying to figure out what on earth she was looking at. The robes reminded her of something like monks' habits, long and white, hanging all the way down to their oddly oversized shoes. Their faces were completely covered by white hoods that seemed to be part of the robes themselves. At the top, the hoods rose into two soft points that drooped down over each shoulder like strange fabric horns. Around their waists they wore belts, and dangling from them were what looked like tools or instruments, glinting in the bright moonlight. The two figures in front, walking side by side, couldn't have been more than a meter tall, Ann guessed. The one trailing just behind them was a little taller, but what really struck her was the way they moved. Their feet never left the ground. Instead, they slid forward in a slow, shuffling motion, almost like they were gliding. Their legs stayed completely stiff, and it made her wonder if they even had knees at all. One of the figures in front was holding something in its hands. The closest thing she could compare it to was an old-fashioned carpet sweeper, like a clunky vacuum cleaner from decades past. As they moved along, it moved the object slowly from left to right and back again over the sidewalk, covering several stones with each sweep, as if scanning it like a metal detector. Ann felt uneasy watching them from the window. Something about the scene set her on edge, but she didn't want to wake her husband. His heart wasn't strong, and the shock might be too much for him. So she stood there in silence and kept watching. 5 long minutes went by. Then, all of a sudden, one of the figures looked up and spotted her. It seemed to turn to the others and say something. Without hesitation, the group spun around and shuffled off at surprising speed, disappearing behind a nearby school building. Ann stayed at the window a while longer, peering down the empty street, hoping, or maybe fearing, that there might be more to see. But there was nothing. Still buzzing with adrenaline, she rushed back to the bedroom, deciding after all to wake her husband and tell him what she had seen. But just as she stepped into the room, something outside the window caught her eye, the window that looked out over the backyard and the street beside the house. There, hovering just above the sidewalk about 40 meters away, was a glowing red ball. Ann estimated it to be about 2 to 2.5 meters across, wide enough to stretch over the full width of the pavement. The light it gave off reminded her of a setting sun, but far too bright to look at directly. Her husband, now awake, asked what time it was. Ann turned to check the clock radio. 5 to 2:30, she said. When she looked back at the window, the red ball had vanished without a trace. Shaken, she told her husband everything. The strange little figures out front, the glowing orb in the back. There was nothing more they could do, so eventually, they tried to get back to sleep. The next morning, Ann went to the local police station and reported the entire incident, hoping someone else had seen something similar that night. A year passed, and Ann still had not received any explanation from the police. Frustrated but still searching for answers, she decided to share her story with someone she trusted, a friend named Bob Muyen who was open to this kind of experience. As it happened, Bob's son Edmund had a deep interest in the UFO phenomenon. He immediately recognized the importance of what Ann had seen. Edmund wrote an open letter describing the encounter and was the one to send it to the Center for UFO Studies in Illinois, known as CUFOS. The story caught the attention of researcher David Webb, who later included it in his book Year of the Humanoids, published in 1976. As mentioned earlier, the book focuses entirely on humanoid sightings that took place around the world in 1973. Ann's experience fit that pattern. It was remarkable, and the story was far from over. The year 1973 was an important one in the history of UFO research for several reasons. It was a year marked by a notable humanoid flap, a term used in ufology to describe a sudden rise in reports involving unidentified aerial phenomena, particularly those including descriptions of beings or occupants. The word flap, originally a military expression for a period of disorganization or heightened alert, was adopted by UFO researchers to designate clusters of sightings that depart significantly from average reporting levels. Unlike wave, which implies a more rhythmic or external force, flap retains the connotation of a collective disturbance, a spike in both observation and attention that defies easy causality. What makes the concept of a flap analytically rich is its irregularity. Whether one sees UFOs as physical craft or as psychological and cultural phenomena, the question remains, why should reports amass in certain periods and not others? If they are evidence of structured visits, one might expect continuous surveillance. If they are misperceptions or symbolic expressions, one might anticipate a steadier rate of occurrence. Yet the data shows something else. Sharp increases over short intervals, geographically and temporally bounded. The fall of 1973 was such a time, famously documented by David Webb, whose report, 1973, Year of the Humanoids, compiled dozens of detailed encounters, many involving small entities in strange garments. It was also in late 1973 that the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, was established under the leadership of astronomer Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Having served as a scientific consultant to the U.S. Air Force during Project Blue Book, Hynek had become convinced that serious study of the phenomenon required a dedicated, interdisciplinary effort. CUFOS brought together physicists, psychologists, sociologists, and other researchers, most of which had previously operated informally as the Invisible College. A loosely connected group of professionals exchanging findings and hypotheses out of public view. The founding of CUFOS was both a response to the pressing need for systematic investigation and a formalization of a research network that had already been quietly active. It marked a shift from casual speculation to organized inquiry during a year when reports surged and the questions only grew more complex. To support its investigative efforts, CUFOS launched a 24-hour toll-free hotline for UAP sightings in the U.S., which received 443 reports in its first year. By the following year, the FBI was directing field offices and local police to forward witness calls directly to CUFOS and encouraged placing the hotline number beside switchboards. This collaboration deepened when the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin published Hynek's article, The UFO Mystery, in February 1975, offering guidance on how law enforcement could assist CUFOS in conducting systematic investigations. According to an internal FBI memo, the notable debunker Philip J. Klass contacted the Bureau to object to the decision to feature Hynek's article, doing so in strong terms laced with sarcasm. The FBI representative who received the call defended Hynek as a reputable scientist affiliated with a respected university. Klass reportedly scoffed, "He won't be for long." To be involved with UFOs in the 1970s meant dealing with contact and abduction. The field was no longer limited to lights in the sky or distant objects. CUFOS, though initially focused on observational cases, could not entirely avoid this shift, despite Hynek's personal discomfort. In the August 16, 1976 issue of People magazine, when asked how he regards abduction and contactee accounts, Hynek replied, "Frankly, I quite strenuously avoid them. I'm almost embarrassed by the reports. None of those people have ever been able to produce anything reliable. It's junk, junk, junk." The legacy after Hynek is complex. With his passing, the effort to institutionalize UAP research through CUFOS faded from public view and remained scattered. In many ways, the field circled back to where it had started. Networks, informal exchanges, and a return to something resembling the old Invisible College. Where once information moved through private correspondence and closed-door meetings, it now circulates across blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, and social media. The gatekeepers are gone, the archives are open, and anyone can contribute. Authority is less institutional and instead performatively dispersed, now a networked culture, still seeking patterns, still interpreting the unexplained. In 2019, the Ann Dolphijn case came back into circulation, not through academic channels or formal investigation, but through a blog post. In Bram Roza's hands, the case became more than a forgotten Dutch encounter. His blog post reframed it as a key fragment in the larger mosaic of 1973, one of many sightings that blurred the line between the local and the global, the credible and the dismissed. Drawing on Douwe Bosga's original fieldwork, Roza didn't just retell the event. He recontextualized it, threading it through the questions that still haunt UAP research. What counts as evidence? Who gets to decide? Mr. Roza, original founder of UFO Meldpunt Nederland, has always had a strong interest in UAP cases, especially those originating on Dutch soil. Since learning about the Ann Dolphijn case, it has stayed with him, and he has taken notice whenever it has been treated carelessly or misrepresented. On his blog, he writes about one such incident. In 1973, the book UFOs Over the Low Countries by Hans van Kampen was published. It included a brief reference to Ann's experience, but presented the story in a way that distorted key details. The account appeared to be exaggerated, possibly in an effort to undermine the credibility of J. Allen Hynek, who had included the case in his database of close encounters. Van Kampen wrote, for example, that Ann had seen a flying saucer in her garden, that it seemed to be operated by small figures in spacesuits who were busy collecting soil samples, and that the figures eventually entered the craft before it disappeared in a flash of light. To Mr. Roza, this kind of portrayal did not align with the original account. It seemed to trivialize both the witness and the investigation. In 1984, a man named Mr. Moss wrote a letter to the Journal of the Study Group for Unusual Aerial Phenomena, known as SVL. He had recently read Van Kampen's version and felt the need to respond. Mr. Moss had followed the case closely for years and believed that reports like this should be kept factual, because otherwise, they risk becoming distorted or sensationalized. In his letter, he also offered a possible explanation for what Ann may have seen. Mr. Moss shared a memory from when he had moved into a newly built neighborhood, where many of the streets were still unpaved. One night, a van from the Gasuni pulled up, and a group of men got out, each with tools hanging from their belts. They were carrying a device that looked exactly like a manual floor sweeper, just like the one Ann had described. The men shuffled slowly through the sand along the houses, sweeping the device across the ground. When Moss asked what they were doing, one of them explained that they were checking for gas leaks in the newly laid pipelines. The work had to be done at night, he said, because lower gas usage meant higher pressure in the pipes, making leaks easier to detect. The SVL never followed up on the story, but another UFO research group, Nobavo, took the lead. They saw potential in the explanation and reached out to the regional gas supplier, Obragas, for more information. Unfortunately, by that time it was already 1985, and the company had to admit that all documentation older than 10 years had been destroyed. So there was no way to confirm or rule out whether a gas leak inspection had taken place. Bram Roza considered this proposed explanation plausible in certain respects. The timing matched, as did the presence of tool belts and a device resembling a gas detector. In that regard, the theory appeared to align with elements of the original witness account. However, Mr. Roza also noted that the explanation failed to address several core aspects of the case. It offered no clarity regarding the unusual clothing, the small stature of the figures, their peculiar movement, or the presence of the glowing orb. In 1980, Hans van Kampen published another UFO book, Spooklicht, and once again returned to the case of Ann Dolphijn. This time the account was considerably more solid, as it was based on a report by Douwe Bosga, who, as we know, received the story firsthand. Van Kampen also offered a new explanation, a carnival. In the Netherlands, the carnival season officially kicks off on the 11th of the 11th at 11 minutes past 11. Around this date, the local Prince Carnival is also inaugurated, which in places like Brabant can lead to some pretty lively celebrations. So it's not out of the question that 3 costumed partygoers, possibly a bit tipsy, stumbled through a residential neighborhood in the middle of the night. Maybe it was even the newly appointed Prince Carnival with 2 of his attendants from the Council of 11. And yes, according to Bram, that's a real thing. One of the most recognizable parts of the Prince Carnival's costume is his hat. In large parades, it's usually a tall, pointed cap made of blue velour with long pheasant feathers. But in smaller local groups, the hat is often simpler. Plain white, usually made of felt or fabric rather than velour. And instead of standing straight up, it droops to the side, a bit like a traditional jester's cap. The prince also carries a ceremonial scepter, so if someone saw him walking a little unsteadily, they might have mistaken the scepter for a walking stick. It's not that hard to imagine. Or maybe it was just a group of kids, heading home unusually late from a costume party, and afraid of being recognized and reported, took off running. But even so, as Roza points out, that doesn't explain the glowing red orb in the garden. So calling it a case of mistaken identity wasn't enough to close the file. Too many details remained unexplained, and the report didn't neatly fit into any one category. And we must remember, 1 month after Ann Dolphijn's original sighting, a similar incident took place in Vilvoorde, Belgium. In this case, it was a 28-year-old man who, like Ann, got out of bed in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. It was 2 a.m. As he walked toward the toilet, he heard strange metallic sounds coming from outside and noticed a green glow filtering through the curtains. When he pulled them open, he saw a figure no taller than a meter walking through his garden, holding an instrument that looked, as you might remember from one of our earlier videos, it looked like a carpet sweeper. Bram Roza also draws a line from the 2 European cases to a third, lesser-known report from across the Atlantic. In November 1973, a similarly strange encounter occurred in Quebec, Canada. On the evening of Sunday, November 18th, 4 young women were driving from Sorel-Tracy toward Montreal. Just past Sorel-Tracy, a glowing orb appeared in the sky ahead of their car. After they caught up with it, the orb seemed to follow them all the way toward their destination. But long before reaching Montreal, they and other drivers passed through a strange pink mist hovering just above the road surface. As they exited the fog, they saw a small figure shuffling across the white lines between the lanes, seemingly undisturbed by the passing traffic. The figure appeared to be sweeping the road with, you might have guessed it, what looked like a carpet sweeper. Further along, they saw a car in a ditch on the roadside, and a bit beyond that, 3 black-clad figures standing beside a stationary vehicle. This incident was featured in Claude Macduff's 1975 book, Le Procès des Soucoupes Volantes, where it was presented as a genuinely extraterrestrial event, in essence because of the solitary nature of the figure. Roadwork, after all, is typically done in teams. But in the English summary by John Brent, published in UFO, Occupants and Critters, the author leans toward skepticism. Brent noted that he had often seen highway workers alone on stretches of road near Alberta, while their colleagues worked farther along. Still, due to the lack of solid information about the small figure, the strange pink mist, and the UFO itself, the case has never been resolved. Tell me, what do you think? Bram Roza asks his readers, pointing to what he calls a near-simultaneous triptych, 3 eerily similar close encounters reported within a single month in 1973. Each case features at least one small figure, active at night, wielding an object uncannily like a carpet sweeper. Roza considers the usual explanations. Could it be coincidence? Possibly. Could it be 3 people who had similar dreams? That, too, is conceivable. But mass hysteria? Unlikely. These stories didn't emerge from group settings or shared media. For Roza, no single explanation accounts for all the details. The shared specificity across continents, and the timing, suggests something harder to dismiss. In an interview featured in the Dutch lifestyle magazine &C, Bram Roza reflects on his approach to UFOs and why he continues to document sightings in the Netherlands. Known for running the website UFO Zaken and Dutch UFO Reporting Center, Roza positions himself somewhere between researcher and advocate, grounded, but open to possibilities beyond current frameworks. The most popular hypothesis for UFOs is extraterrestrial visitation, and that's possible, he says. But personally, I'm more inclined to think it's something we don't understand at all yet. Something completely unknown to us with our current scientific knowledge. Natural phenomena, government technologies, beings from another dimension. Or maybe it's us, coming from the future. Roza also speaks to the lack of institutional support or community in the Netherlands for people who've had encounters. Aside from my reporting center, there really isn't a UFO community in the Netherlands where people come together to talk about what they've seen. There are people who are interested, mostly those who've had their own experiences, but they don't gather to share their sightings. I like to stand up for these people, especially when they're ridiculed for their stories. He describes his 2023 documentary, the UFOs of Soesterberg, as an effort to change that narrative. The documentary spotlights a 1979 sighting in which 12 airmen at a Dutch airbase reported seeing a massive, silent, triangular craft. The Air Force dismissed it as a mirage, Roza explains. They were all outraged by that.
Hadden ze het over lichten. Lichten die in een bepaald patroon van elkaar zich voortbewoog boven de startbaan. Eén militair die zegt, als hij een boek had gehad, had hij in een van die lichten had hij een boek kunnen lezen. Terwijl het 5 uur in de nacht was, het was in februari, het was stikken donker.
Want het is natuurlijk frustrerend om te vertellen aan de hele wereld van, ik heb wat gezien, ik ben niet gek. En met mij nog 11 andere collega's, we hebben het allemaal gezien, maar jullie geloven ons niet. What if?
So now tell us. You are the invisible college, watching, reading, remembering, and keeping the questions alive. Much like those who join in the comments beneath Bram Roza's blog post. One woman writes how she saw something with her father 20 years ago. They still don't know what it was, and they don't need to. It's my experience, she writes. Neither of us can explain it, but that's okay. It always leads to interesting conversations. Whether something is real or not isn't for someone else to decide for me, and unfortunately for science, there's no way to ever verify if it was true. But does something unexplained always need to be proven? She ends her post by asking, what makes people so desperate to have a special experience validated? Yes, perhaps we could hold off, if only for a moment, and experience what that feels like. Things do happen. Things that stay with us in ways we've never experienced before. Much like Anne, with her nose almost pressing that cold window pane on a moonlit night in the 70s. That's it for us this time. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to drop us a thumbs up and tell us what you think about Anne's experience, UFO flaps, or anything beyond the ordinary. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. We really appreciate all of you who share feedback, ask questions, or simply cheer us on, and we like to stay curious together. We're thrilled to welcome our new members and amazing supporters on Patreon. We also want to say a huge thank you for the appreciated super chats, as well as for the equally appreciated cups of coffee. And of course, as always, a heartfelt thanks to our ongoing supporters who mean the world to us.